I'm Taylor Hart.
And I'm Avonlea.
And you guys, back in 2018, Avonlea and I got together and we did a little experiment. We created a course to help other people who have a dream to become writers. And we recorded a live series of video trainings together. And the recordings, they've kind of just been sitting out in cyberspace.
Yeah, so Taylor recently contacted me and asked me what I thought about putting this training out there in all of its messiness and imperfection, in the hope that it might help some of you who maybe has been displaced by the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's right. We have both in our lives faced hard things, and we want you guys to know we're there for you. We love you, and we want to be part of a solution. These recordings, you guys, they're totally raw and unedited, but they're 100% value. We hope you'll use them, benefit from them, and when you do write your book,
not if, but when,
then you'll let us know. And you'll share it on social media. You'll tag us, Taylor Hart, Avonlea, because these are going to be coming out. They're going to be coming out right now.
All the videos, all at once, they're there. So just go and enjoy the videos, share your success with us, and happy writing.
Happy writing.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Lesson 8 in Taylor Hart's Secrets to Building a Six-Figure Writing Business. We're broadcasting from a winter wonderland in Utah today, and we have a special guest, Daniel Coleman, who's going to be teaching us the ropes of the editing process from his years of expertise and experience. So we'll introduce him a little bit more in detail in a moment. Let's get started with our mindset with Taylor.
Okay, you guys, I want you to know that this is going to be probably one of the best lessons, because I've known Coleman a long time, and he's probably the meanest editor I've ever had. So that's why I brought him. Well, I wanted him today because he's going to talk straight to you and tell you some really good stuff.
And I take that as a compliment, so thank you.
That's right. Okay, so for our mindset today, you guys, I love doing these every week because I get to think all week about what I want to talk to you about. And this week, I've been reading a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. And I know I've talked to you guys about cybernetics before, but it's like that heat-seeking missile, right? That launches and it finds its target, no matter how many times it's gotten off course, okay? It goes and finds the target. So for ourselves, it's good to always think, where's my target? Where's my set point, okay? And if I'm not getting to my set point, why? Why am I not getting to that set point? And I've become fascinated with this. And so this week, I want to talk to you about building the case for yourself, okay? And if you think about it, if you think about a judge, right? And every day he's in court and there's two attorneys presenting a case, okay? Two sides of a story, all right? And he gets to decide which has more truth in it, what he believes. Well, our brain is our judge, okay? And we're kind of telling our brain all the time this story, okay? And maybe the story some days is, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I just can't do this today. It's cold, and like I hurt my shoulder last week, and like sitting in the chair, I don't want to write today, and my son's having a breakdown at school, and I just can't write the words today, right? Like that's a case that I can build for myself really easily. Or I can build a case, guess what? I'm a professional and I write these words every day. I slam down these words no matter what, no matter who's having a breakdown, no matter what family member's trying to get hold of me, no matter what's happening, the weather, anything, I write these words every day. That's something I can control, and that's what I can do, okay? And you see, like, it's as a writer, and I mean, Daniel can talk about this too, you have to push out the words, even if they're junk, even if they're not, you're not sure that you're going to keep all those words. Practicing the words every day is what's going to build success. It's what's going to make you successful. So my challenge to you this week is build a case that you can do this, that whatever goal you set, whatever word count, you can set that goal and you can meet it every day or 5 days a week. I mean, I have a 5-day a week set schedule, right? Because that's what I can control. But make it manageable and make that target, and then build that case for yourself. And even when things get in the way of that, it's 10 o'clock at night, you still haven't written those words, sit down and write the words when you're tired. So anyway, build the case for yourself. That's our mental message today.
Awesome.
Okay. Now I want to tell you guys a little bit about Daniel Coleman. So I met him through Cami Checkits, and I've talked about her before. She's a good friend of both of ours. And he not only has edited for me, but we've written in the same series a couple times on some Navy SEAL books. And Daniel brings a real energy to story structure and passion for good stories. And that's the one thing that, even though I hate him sometimes, because I do hate him sometimes.
It's true.
But he's invaluable because he can read a story and go, ooh, that's a weakness here, that's a problem here. If you tweak this, if you change this character, it'll help your story structure. And Daniel, we have had a lesson on story structure and on the beats and, outlining and everything. And so they're familiar with that. But you guys, sometimes you're so close to your writing, okay? And you've written the story, you've outlined the story, you've talked about the story 100 times, and you can't see the flaw in your story. And so Daniel does every type of editing. We talked about how we were gonna, explain to them, Daniel, and I'm gonna let you do this if you don't care, the difference between a proof edit, a copy edit, and a content edit.
Yep.
And I mean, personally, they're all very, very important, but if you don't have a good content edit, if you don't have a good story, that's what sinks you as a writer. Like, you have to learn story. So, okay, Daniel, I'm going to kind of just turn it over to you today.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here. You mentioned Winter Wonderland, and before I came to the webinar, I was outside shoveling snow, and it was single digits out there. And so I'm glad to be in here. I already drank all my hot chocolate, so that's gone, but much nicer in here than it is out there. Two things you mentioned there that I really want to touch on is you really do need editing. If I get one point across, you do need an editor. I just sent a story off to my editor this week. I've got a phone conversation with him. I use 2 editors mainly. There's one, anyway. I've got a phone conversation today scheduled at 5 o'clock with one of them because I am so close to my stories. And even the story that I put off for like a year and a half and went back to, I was able to go in and fix some things, but I know it still has a problem, but I can't see what it is. So I'm really glad you touched on that.
Well, Daniel, start off and tell them what you're doing and your journey.
All right. One other thing, you mentioned passion, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because I really do feel that that is the most important thing. If you're passionate about what you do, you'll have success, you'll go far. I didn't even know I could be a writer until I was 30 years old. A friend of mine said, hey, I entered the short story contest, and I was confused because I'm thinking, you're not a writer, you didn't study English, and then all of a sudden, like, wait, if he can write short stories, then I can be a writer too. And it was literally 1 second to the next where I said, that's what I want to do. And it took me about 2 years to actually sit down and start writing.
So cool.
And since I did, I haven't stopped. I mean, it's consumes my life when I'm not doing anything else, when I'm not at work or with the family, I'm writing. I spend all of my free time. I don't hang out with friends a whole lot. I don't golf. I don't, do any of those things. I do a lot of writing. I published my, sorry?
So this is your side hustle.
It is. Yeah. And I hope, Taylor talks about deciding where you want to go. 5 years ago, I wrote a note. I have my laptop here, and it'd be too bulky to turn around, but I wrote on the top of it, October 16, 2020, because that's the day I want to retire. And about 2 years ago, I printed out a number. This is how many dollars I need. I need $447,493 to retire on that date. And so for the last 3.5 years, every day when I open up my laptop and start writing, I see that across the top. And so I really had that in mind. And I had no idea how it was going to happen because I originally, in 2011, I published my first book, Jabberwocky. And you can see it's pretty small. It's a novella. I eventually signed with a publisher, took it off the market, went and rewrote it and made it a full novel. So doubled the size of it. And I signed a 3-book deal. They went out of business before we got to market on those. And so I did 30 rewrites.
I've read your books and they love your books.
Oh, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, these are fantasy, which is totally different than what I've been around the last 2 years. I did 30 rewrites on these. My goal was to be this award-winning author, be the next Brandon Sanderson, Robert Jordan, whoever you can say, whoever you want.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to do is I want to make a living writing, and I'm well on the path towards that. About 2 years ago, Taylor and a couple other friends approached me and said, "Hey, we're writing clean romance books. We're going to write a firefighter series. Are you interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I am. I'd be crazy not to."
But I don't think you've told him you are a firefighter.
Oh yeah, I'm a full-time firefighter. Sorry, that didn't come out. So I've been a firefighter and paramedic for a little over 18 years now. And so 2 years from now is when I hit that 20 years, and that's when I want to hang up the turnouts and write full-time. So I got involved with Taylor and this other group. And in the last 2 years, if I add up all the money I've made writing, I've made 85% of that over the last 2 years writing clean romance with Taylor and her friends, our friends, I should say, because we've got a really great group. I've learned so much, the craft and all that. I've been learning the whole time. But as far as publishing and making this a career and being serious about it, I've learned more in the last 2 years than I did in 10 years before that. So that's kind of a lot of intro, and we will get, some of that is important. I do have a phobia about wasting people's time, so I have some notes, and that's why I keep looking over here, because I want to make sure this is valuable to the people that are here. I know you could be writing, which is super valuable use of your time. So,
But Daniel, you have to think, I mean, they are at the beginning. And so these are some of the questions we've had. They want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we have Q&A capabilities on a chat later, but we should have a few minutes at the end. So if you do have questions, you can chime in, I think, and we can answer some questions. Taylor and Avonlea are going to be popping in, asking questions as we go, right?
Absolutely. Because like,
all right.
I can write. I know how to write. Like that's, you know, and this is where I'm kind of like the example of our ideal customer here, because I have learned the basic process of how to create beautiful poetry and content and write a book from start to finish. And Taylor has helped me with the outlining process to make sure
and
that
tell them how far you are.
I'm so close, you guys. I am more than 3/4 of the way. I've gotten through the climax, and I totally got stuck on how to write the resolution. And so I have to go back to the beat sheet, and maybe this is where a content editor like yourself would help me be like, this is why your story's not working and you're having a hard time writing your resolution. I don't know. But
Absolutely.
The editing process is the part that I am completely like in the dark about. I know that it's necessary. I have no idea how to find an editor. I have no idea. I didn't know that there were different types of editors, and I don't know how much I should pay an editor. And so there's like a lot of big questions for me that this could be the thing that shuts me down as a writer. If I get to this point of the process and I go, this is too big and scary, and I pull back and stop. So this is actually a really important piece of my personal journey. And I hope that it's an important part of your journey as a writer to be like, yeah, I'm brave enough to write a book, but I'm too scared to go to the next level.
Yeah.
It is such an important part, because if you do have that passion for it and you're putting your heart and soul onto the paper, to hand it to someone else and say, okay, now tell me what's wrong with my baby. Tell me everything that's wrong with it. And Taylor, I do get hate mail from Taylor. It doesn't happen every single time. It used to happen almost every single time. But I do get hate mail, and I appreciate it, because then she'll email a couple of days later and she said, you were right, and I fixed the problems you pointed out. The book's better now. So yeah, we'll go from the beginning here. My first experience with editing was going to a writing group. It was the League of Utah Writers. And you show up, you bring a chapter, you read it, and then 2 weeks later, you hand out copies. 2 weeks later, you come back and everyone critiques it. And so that was my first editing. And the pages just came back covered in red. There was more red ink than there was black. And I would read through it and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then I would fix it and I'd go back the next week better, and there'd be new things. There are still things I learned from that group that I hear in my head as I'm writing. I'm like, oh, can't say that because Chad would tell me such and such. And I hear his annoying voice in my head and I'm like, I don't want to hear him say that. So I'm not going to write like that. So even going back 12 years when I was just starting out, that stuff still sticks with me. And so that really is your first group. If you're a new writer, is finding a group of people, because honestly, you can get almost the same critique from a writing group, a beginning writing group, as you can from a professional editor. At that stage where you're at, where you're just learning the building blocks and you're learning how the big picture fits together, I really think a writing group is about as valuable. And I have a friend of mine who I've known for about 20 years, and he had me do some editing for him recently. And I told him, you'll get just as much out of finding a group of people that are in the same stage as you and just kind of bouncing ideas off each other. But anyway, let's get into a little bit of the different types of editing, like Taylor mentioned. Once you finish, everyone's a little different, so I will start out by giving that caveat. Everyone wants a little bit different type of editing. Everyone will work better with different type of editors. But to go over the three main types of editors or editing, the main one, the big bulky one that you're going to want first is, there's different words for it: substantive edit, developmental edit, or content edit. And they're looking at the big picture of their book. They're looking at the story arc from the beginning to the end. They're looking to make sure the structure, the organization, that you have coherence, that your characters are consistent. They're looking at arcs. So your character needs an arc. They need a starting point, they need a journey, and they need an ending point. Depending on what genre you're writing. If you're writing romance, then there's also a love story arc where your character's love story starts somewhere. It goes through a journey, and then you have that obstacle, that insurmountable obstacle that they overcome. And then you have your ending point. So big picture things like that is what a content or developmental editor will be looking at. This is usually the going rate for professional editing in Utah anyways, around $2 a page at 250 words a page. Some editors charge more. Some people are worth more than that. You can get it done cheaper. And we'll go into a little bit more on finding an editor later on. Thoughts on that? And that's what I do mostly, is developmental editing, where I take the story, start at the beginning, read through, and I make notes. I do comments on the side as I go, but then I also do a separate analysis, which is a separate document where I break down the different categories. And these are the things I cover. I start with the three main issues. Like, these are the three places where the story's broken the worst. If you fix these three, you'll have 90% of the story. And I can see Taylor smiling over there. That's where I get snarky sometimes.
Yes, he does.
I go into themes, because if you know what the theme of your book is, like if you have someone who was an adopted kid and they're trying to find a home or find a place, find somewhere where they belong, you want that to tie into the story arc, whether it's falling in love or whether it's the hero's journey. You want the theme of the book to be consistent. You want resonance. You want coherence as you go through. I talk about characters, including arcs, depending on whether or not it's romance, love story arc, plot and pacing, which go hand in hand. And so Avonlea, you're in you said you're done with the climax and now you're in the resolution now. And you want to make sure. And so when the reader gets there, they have certain expectations that the climax is going to be a certain way. And then once that gets resolved, they want to spend the right amount of time with the characters, kind of having some happy time right at the end of the book. And so it has to be long enough. It can't be too long. And so that's where plot and pacing come in, where the plot has to go in a good order, have a good flow to it, and spend the right amount of time on each part. And I typically am telling people to zoom in more, slow this down, give us more, add a paragraph or two here, because we came all this way, and I really want to get into this moment more, because this is a really big moment. I'm really enjoying this, or I'm really feeling a lot of pain right now for this character, and I want to feel more. I love it when authors really make me feel for a pain, and I'll sometimes give Taylor right back. Oh, you're killing me on this one. I'm sitting at my son's soccer practice, and I've got tears in my eye. You're killing me here. Doing great. So I do love to see that pain. I do give it back a little bit. Writing strengths and weaknesses is another category.
Right here.
Yeah.
Where do you think writers do get hung up the most in structure? Is it where Avonlea is? Is it at the end? I mean, for myself, I find it's probably there, because I'm just not quite sure how to finish it. You know?
I think that for me, I think the big time is leading right before the climax, because I find myself a lot of times saying, we're at the 80% mark, we should be feeling like this, or we're expecting this, or we want this kind of a feeling. But then, yes, once you get over the hump and everything is resolved, I'd say those are the two big ones. It is hard to end a book and know, okay, the story's over. Where do I go from here? How much do I spend with these characters? How much time do I keep going? So those are two big moments where the pacing really is, people do have trouble, I'd say.
So I'm normal.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Definitely. And you know what? You'll read it. You'll finish it. You'll read through it again, and you'll be like, wait, that happened. in my mind, that took so long because it took me 2 hours to write those two paragraphs. So, but as you read through it again, you're like, it was nothing. The moment was like that. I didn't feel anything. Okay, I got to go in there. And so as you read through, you'll experience that, and you'll see that as you go.
Yeah. And it sounds like, just as I'm hearing what you're describing in terms of this type of editing, it seems like there's an order of operations in terms of which editor you hire first. And this would be the one you would want to go to first. You don't want to go through all those tiny grammatical edits until you've got your story locked in. Is this correct?
Exactly. Yeah, because we are remodeling walls. I'm like, you got to take out this wall because it's getting in the way of the story, or you need more support here. So we're doing major construction here. So with my books where I did so many edits and so many revisions, you don't want to go through and do 30 revisions and then give it to an editor. You also don't want to do one write through and not go through it yourself, because you can fix a lot of that yourself. And the cleaner it is when you go to an editor, the more they can do. But also you don't want to waste too much time beforehand, before you give it to that editor, cleaning up too much, because then when they take out this wall and build a new patio back here, then you're redoing all that work. So you don't want every line of prose to be perfect.
What about your beta readers? Like, when do you bring your beta readers into that process for their feedback?
That's a great question. I don't use beta readers. I have 2 different editors that I use. I would say I would recommend doing that before you give it to a content editor. If you can get it clean enough where they can follow the story, and yeah, there'll be some grammatical errors. You may have a note here like, I don't know where they go from, or insert or setting details here or something like that. So they get the gist of it. But if you have a good beta reading team, I would go to them before you go to a content editor, because they can point out some big stuff for you, and they work cheaper than editors do.
I was going to say, just like you, when I first started, I had a writing group, and we would read each other's, and kind of how we learned, because we would beta read each other's and do these contents for each other.
So valuable.
You know?
And
then you can start picking up, getting a feel of like, oh wait, this doesn't work. Right?
I have one editor that I learned so much with, and he was in my first writing group, and he and I remember a lot of things. One of them was, you really learn the most by writing, critiquing other people's writing, and what's the other? I'm drawing a huge blank now, but critiquing other people's writing, going into what they've written and finding the problem helps you become a better writer, because you're having to look at that story structure and learn the process yourself.
So maybe I'm just thinking, because before I could afford to hire Daniel, I did those writing groups and a lot of beta reading, and that was kind of the content edit. Right?
It definitely is. And they're not professional. So you have to take, because I have beta readers that I got stuff back and I'm like, I can't use anything in this because you and I don't mesh, or because you don't know, I don't know what but thank you, but I can't really use it. Other people, I'm like, everything you said is so helpful. Yeah. And that's how I learned. And that's how I became an editor, by working in so many different groups like that. And just learning the ropes as I go. The other one was having your work critiqued. So writing, having your work critiqued, and critiquing other people's. It's almost like the trifecta of becoming a better writer. Yeah, so if you are in a writing group, it'll help you a lot.
In my creative nonfiction classes at the university. So if anything, I might not have learned how to go through the process of writing a novel and publishing, but just being in that experience of being in a class and exchanging work with other students, gave me that experience to go, okay, I don't take this person's feedback, because I've also seen what they write, and I know that we don't write the same.
Right.
And, so I learned who to trust in that class, and their feedback meant something to me based on how they wrote, what they wrote, and the feedback that they gave me. So that was a way for me to kind of find my tribe at that time. But we kind of covered that last week, of the difficulty of finding a good writers group.
We did.
Oh, good. Okay.
How to kick people out if they're not the right ones.
I've been in multiple writing groups. I've started writing groups. I've moved on from writing groups. So I've been there, and it is very valuable, and I would not be where I'm at if I hadn't. Part of the reason I met Cami Checkitts through a writing group, and through Cami I met Taylor and all of our other friends in our group. So writing groups can also be a great way to network and to really find the people that are going the same place that you're going. And I may touch on that later, but we have two other types of edits to go through. I don't know if I mentioned, but the last 2 steps in the content or the developmental editing that I do are writing strengths and weaknesses. So overall issues, like you tend to way overuse the word but, or all of your sentences start with he, or or big picture things like you have great setting, but not quite enough characterizations, things like that. Just with
I'm laughing because you bust me for this stuff, guys. That's my laugh.
Also, grammar and punctuation. If I see any big things, I'll put them there, because I don't go through and fix every single error. If I see some as I go, I'll fix them. But if it's the same thing over and over, like ellipses, if you and I use ellipses different, or if you never use commas in dialogue, things like that, then I'll just put them in there and they edit instead of changing every one of them. And then overall issues. As I'm going through, if I have questions, that's mostly for like unanswered questions. Like you raised this question, but you never answered it. And so just so you know where the holes are in your plot to fill. I'm not picking on Taylor. I see her smiling over there like she's getting, but it really, it's funny because so many people are so similar with what I see. So I'm sure a lot of what I'm saying is resonating with her, because we've worked together. So I've probably edited 25 of her novels. And so we've worked together so much. We know each other really well. What's that?
I really appreciate you.
And you. I mean, we've worked really well together, and we found a team. There's other people who I've gotten books back, and I just don't feel like I'm helping them that much. And I'll tell them, I'll say, I'll tell them that straight up. Anyway, we need to talk about copy editing, which is the next level. So after you get a developmental edit, you get it back, you do your rewrite, you implement what you can. At that point, you either send it back to your developmental editor. Some people will go through it twice. Some you can just ask questions and kind of bounce stuff off on. You could go to new beta readers and say, does this work? But the next level of editing is copy editing. And they cover grammar, style, repetition, word usage, jargon. So they basically look at the story, look at the words of the story like a newspaper editor, not like a story editor, if that makes sense. Because before someone goes in the newspaper, they're going to make sure it, and this isn't the final, this is not proofreading, so I'm not checking every single comma. They're just reading it to make sure the story makes sense, the sentences make sense, so to speak. They may not notice if your character had brown eyes well, they should actually, but if your character was mean at the beginning and was too nice at the end, and it doesn't seem to match unless there's a story arc there, that's the kind of thing they won't pick up, but they will pick up. You had brown eyes here, and now you have blue eyes. What's up with that? So that's more of a copy edit. And it's similar to the last type of editing, which is proofreading. And proofreading is dotting every I and crossing every T. It's every comma. It's making sure that if you use the word, if you use enormity, for example, which is a misused word a lot, that you know what it means and it goes there. So they're looking at every single minor error. And a lot of times copy editing and proofreading are done at the same time. So me personally, I'll do 1 or 2 developmental edits depending on how much I feel the book needs, and then I'll go to a copy editor that does the proofing also. So I pay 2 editors for each book. I may get a beta reader in there. I may add someone else in there from time to time, but those 2, developmental edit and then a copy edit, which is also serves as my proofread, are the 2 that I do.
So what are the prices that are standard, would you say, for the last 2 edits?
I'd say they're around $1.50. You should be able to get really good editing for $1.50 a page. And that's 250 words per page. Some people charge by the hour, some people charge by the word, but $1.50 to $2 for copy editing and proofreading you should be get really solid work at that price.
And Daniel, where do you recommend? I told them last time about the 20 books to 50K resource on Facebook, and just, I mean, I would even recommend going there to look for editors, but where would you recommend? That's
what I would do if I was well, first of all, I would hit up my friends. I would say, hey, Taylor, who are you using lately for editing? What's the turnaround time? Are you happy? What do they charge? What are their, and so I would start with my friends, and we all kind of use the same editors anyway. We overlap anyway, somewhat. And then from there, I would just go to Facebook, ask any of your writing groups, especially if it's genre specific. If you have a fantasy writing group, then ask your fantasy friends, who's doing your editing? How much do they charge? Is it worth it? And I have some more thoughts on finding an editor. I start with writing groups like we talked about. Not only will you find good editing and develop your own writing skills, you'll find friends, you'll find people that are going the same place you are. It's the same principle with my son's soccer team. I want him to work with people who are serious about it, who want to make the high school team, who are thinking about playing in college maybe. I don't want to be on a team with a bunch of turkeys who are just there to kick the ball into each other's faces or whatever, because he will end up going wherever they go. Same with my daughter's drama classes. Put him with the best people that they can get with, because you're going to go the same place the people you're with go. And Taylor talks about that on us. She knows all about it. I'm sure Avonlea does. I don't know Avonlea as well. That's why I talk about Taylor. We've known each other for years, but I'm sure Avonlea has a lot of, as a life coach, you have a lot of experience with that.
I mean, I think it's that popular quote, either Jim Rohn or somebody that said, you know, you become like the 5 people you spend the most of your time with. So
I believe it.
Who you're surrounding yourself with, because you're going to become like those people.
And it's easy to find. And it's easy to find turkeys in the writing industry. There's so many people out there that aren't serious about it or aren't at the same level you are. There's people who just want to complain about why the system doesn't work and why they're not a best-selling author. And it can be hard, especially if those people are your friends or become your friends, to move past them. And you can still be friends, but you don't need to be business associates with them.
Change the boundaries.
Yeah, great advice. Once you do get, so you get some ideas, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's from friends, once you get some editors to work with, most people will do a sample for you. So you send them a chapter or you send them 10 pages and then they'll critique it. You don't get the full picture. You don't know for sure whether they're going to do the full content and know everything there is, because they're, in 10 pages, there's not very many arcs, but you should be able to get a feel for whether you like, oh, this person's too mean. Oh, this person's too nice. Oh, they didn't give me anything. They make too many comments. They make too few comments. So try a couple of them out. As an editor, don't send out 100 of them and just waste everybody's time. Try to be respectful and do a few at a time, and looking for people who really are going to help you out, who you can work with. And then try a couple out. I would recommend starting on the cheap side, unless you get a great recommendation like this. You're writing epic fantasy for young adults. This person's who you have to use. I wouldn't go way overboard, way more than with the market rate, but I would try them out. But if someone says, hey, I use this person, they're just getting started, they charge this, they have a quick turnaround, give them a try. It really doesn't hurt to give someone a try, because they're going to tell you what they think. And then whether it resonates or not with you is what you have to decide. So that is a big part of editing, is when you get something back from an editor, you have to decide, does this work for my story? Because it really is your baby. And when I make changes, when I make suggestions, I always say, this is how I feel about it. I don't know if this is where you want your story to go. But think about it. And I pointed out suggestions. I tried to anyway. Say that again. I am. Okay.
This needs to be changed.
There are things where I'm like, this is a deal killer for me. I cannot keep reading this book if this doesn't change. I do have those moments. And I do like a little bit of snarkiness. One of the first editors I had was super snarky, way more snarky than I am, just would be sarcastic, would make fun of me, would make fun of and those kind of things stuck with me, and it works for me. I've been a fireman for 18 years, so I can get that banter back and forth. I try not to be that mean. One thing he's told me I'll never forget, he said, I love everything about this sentence except the last 13 words. And so I go through and I count, the sentence had 15 words in it. And so I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, so if I cut those, it says, he cried, or he walked, or, something. I'm like, okay, the story is stronger. You're right. The story is stronger without. And so I learned that you don't need all that padding sometimes. So that one little piece of snarky information that he gave me, and he said it in such a funny way that I'll never forget it. And it really did. So for me, that works. If you want someone that treats you with kid gloves, then go for that. Be careful of people who only give you praise, though. You're not hiring someone to blow smoke or to pat you on the back. And if they are doing that, then they're not doing their job. There are times where I edit a book for Taylor or Cami or Sarah Gay or any of the people, and I'm like, there's very little I can do. I feel like you're almost wasting your money paying me on this one because you've got this book figured out. Here's a couple small things, but you know what you're doing. I'm so jealous of your writing skills, and you're smarter than me. And I'll tell them that. And I do try to be positive. And if there's something I love in the book, I always try and say, I put a smiley face, or I say, I love this line so much. Or I read this line 4 times because I love it so much. I'm just going to sit here and think about it for a minute, because I do get those moments, and I do pass those on, because it's important for a writer to know where the story is working as well as where it's broken.
Well, and you know what, Daniel, you are good at that too. And I'm teasing him a lot, you guys, but I think when you have an editor, it's important they do this. They tell you the things they love, and they tell you where it needs to improve. And you kind of know, right? Like what he's saying, it does resonate with you when you're like, oh gosh, he's right. Okay. But there are times, and had editors that I'm like, okay, this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit with me and who I am and the message I want this story to have. And so I think you do have to have discernment, with your writing, and
Yeah.
really try and stay in tune with your characters and your story and the purpose you have. And when you find a good editor, you'll know, because you guys, you don't want to feel, some editors, you do feel like a piece of crap. Okay. And you want to stay away from that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Protect yourself. Right. And so finding a good mix, and I'll even tell, Daniel, sometimes I'll tell Daniel, okay, this story is pretty, like, I'm kind of vulnerable, so go easy on me. Okay. And I think it's okay to advocate for yourself and tell people what you need. Right.
Absolutely.
And you can still say, tell me the truth, but I don't know if I can handle the snark this time. Right. And that's
yeah.
okay. So.
Absolutely. And that if you work with the person and you develop a relationship, then you can talk like that. And if they aren't respecting what you want out of the story, and if you're like, I only want you to look at this character, I don't want you to focus on this theme because the way this theme runs through the story is exactly how I want it. It's personal to me. It's something I went through. I want that. Whether, with I've written 5 firefighter novels, and some of those things are things that I've gone through and I wrote into the characters, and I'm like, I know this is right. You can tell me if it doesn't work for fiction, but I probably won't change it because this is true to life. When you have so many bad calls in a row, not everyone feels like this, but this is how some people feel. This is how I feel, and I'm not going to. So that's non-negotiable. And you can let them know that up front, and knowing that can really help. There's a huge balance once you do get the critique back between not being willing to kill your babies and following your heart and your soul, because you've got to know whether you can trust that, or you got to know what your story really needs. And I don't really have any advice on that. It does take time, but don't be afraid if you feel like, okay, it will make the story better. The best writers I know, Taylor, some of the other ones I mentioned, Cami, Sarah Gay did this once recently she cut like the last 20% of the book. It was like 8,000 words. And I went back and read it the second time, and the book was so much better. It was like 100%. It was one of her, probably the best book that I've read of hers. And she wasn't afraid to take those 8,000 words she had written in this great scene where they go away to this beachfront property, and there's this huge hurricane. It was so well written, but it did not fit in the story. And so she scrapped it. It never happened. They stayed in their hometown. They got stuck in the airport. Yeah. I'm like, holy cow, that was a big move. That was a really hard thing to do. So kudos. And it made the story better. And she knew that. And she wasn't afraid to do that. So don't be afraid to kill your darlings, even if it's this scene or the scene you really love, if it will make the story better, if you honestly think that that's true.
And sometimes, you guys, as you start out, sometimes you get it wrong, and that's okay too. Okay?
It is.
Me and Daniel have been into this a lot of books now, but at the beginning, you're kind of getting your footing, and gosh, I've done it wrong before. I've picked wrong, and I go back later and read a book, and I'm like, why did I? But I love the saying, I think I said it last time, every master starts out as a disaster. Okay. And so give yourself that freedom too. Say, I'm just doing it. It might be wrong.
Well, and we can be an example of that for you right here. Like, we've never done a program like this before. And we even said at the very beginning of this, like, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it wrong. We're going to do it the worst way we possibly can. And hopefully it's not that bad, but we weren't afraid to fail as we created this program and as we put it out there. And so even this is an example of creation and putting it out there. And we were like, we'll do it wrong the first time.
Yep. And don't be afraid of editors hating you. Like, hating not you, but your stuff, right? Like,
yep.
I remember feeling so anxious, it's like I would send it off to an editor and then I'd have to go read the book again. But now I'm not that way. Daniel can tell you.
I even read something coming through Instagram the other day, and it was like one of those girl boss or leaders in heels type, accounts, but it said something like, maybe it was even Rachel Zoe, I don't know. She said, if you're not ashamed of the first version of your product, you launched too late. If there's not something about that embarrasses you.
I like that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, don't sit on it forever. Like, put it out there, even if it feels like a piece of crap. We've talked about this. This is the second principle in the 6 secrets to creating, or the secrets to creating a 6-figure writing business. Create some piece of crap.
Great crap.
You got to
When we
start.
send, yeah, when we send our kids out to learn soccer or learn to sing or learn anything, we don't expect them to be perfect. We expect them to make mistakes, and we want them to make that mistake so they can go on and be better. And it's this, it's the same with writing. Writing is an art. I did a podcast on creativity for about 6 months. It was weekly. I had a fellow, my co-host was a painter. And so I was a writer, he was a painter, and there's so much overlap. And we got really, so I've studied creativity, and it really is a passion of mine. Not just the writing, but the whole creative arts. And so, you know, I love going to concerts with my kids. We went to a play this week. We went to a concert last night. It's just, there's so much in my writer's soul that resonates with the painter and the dancer and the actor and the musician, because I can feel where that's coming from. There's so much to it, and everyone makes mistakes on the way there.
Yeah, the perfection is inside the imperfection, right?
Yeah,
That's where it is.
And you have to find it, and you're peeling back the layers a little bit. You're getting a little bit better, a little bit better. And a good editor should help you on that journey. If they are holding you back, if they're tearing you down too much, again, this goes back to style. If you're someone who wants kid gloves and needs someone to maybe take you little baby steps, that's one thing. A good editor will be a balance where they're like, I know you're better than this, and I'll put the comments, and I'll, you know, for Taylor, I'll put, I know you can write this character better than this is one of your strong points, TH, and that's why I'm mad at you right now. Yeah, because I know, and so I know what she can do, and I know what she's capable of. I know what she's done in the past, and I say that your readers know that you can nail this part, and so you got to nail it. And so I try to, you know, be that kind of coach, and not like, this is horrible, but be like, you are a person that I learned this from, so you have to do it better. And so a good editor, I think, will help you with that.
Speaking as the student in this trio, I would have to say this is a really scary part of the process.
Yeah.
So to all you writers out there who are ambitious and you want to create this, I feel this fear for you. You know, you've been working really hard on going down this road, this journey of becoming a writer, and suddenly you hit this point where it's like, okay, now I have to kind of risk something, and I have to be willing to accept the feedback. And so, you know, we've tried to prep you, I think, along the way to say, just create some piece of crap, just create a draft, just put something out there, and to tell you there is going to be work after this point. Yeah. This isn't the final product. And so I think it's just important to like prep your mind to be able to say, okay, I'm going to be in a place where I'm willing to receive feedback. Yeah. I'm willing to see the truth, and I'm not afraid of it, that I can take it and that it will make me better if I can open my mind and my heart to receive this type of feedback from an editor, from my writers group, whoever that is, because this is a place in the process where it could shut you down. If you don't find yourself willing to, okay, now this is the next part of the process, and you think of it as this is just a step in a process. It's not anything about who I am and my ability as a writer, you know? Right. I think that's just like where I'm feeling like, okay, this could really hold me up, and I can see it holding other people up as well. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much to our teachers for helping us understand this process.
I think that's very important.
Knowledge is power. When you understand how it works, you kind of like prepare your mind to say, okay, I know that I'm just throwing out this draft and that it's going to need some more work, and that's okay.
Yeah. It's okay. And that's something you can take baby steps on as well. If you're not ready to take your whole manuscript, and if you haven't workshopped it with a writing group, I say give it to some friends and family, and some people who know a little bit about writing at least. And that's what I did first. I didn't go out and hire an editor. Even before I went to my writing group, I gave it to a friend, gave it to my wife, and I remember thinking, this is the best thing ever written. This first chapter is amazing. And it turns out it wasn't. Go figure. It came back and it had a lot of issues, and I'm like, you're right. And they were right about 90%, because I'm not afraid if an editor tells me something and I'm like, no, you're wrong. And then I'll look at it again. I'll look at it from a different angle. You're still wrong, editor. This is how my story needs to be. And then I'll go on. So I do not take 100% of what my editors give me. 80-90% is about what I do. And I think that's pretty safe. And I hope there's things that Taylor sees where she just says, no, DC, you're way off on this one. You don't understand the audience, or you don't. And that's what I expect. And I hope you're doing that.
See, but I think it's an interesting phenomenon, what you're talking about. And when you said you gave it to your family, is that, thank you. I'll watch like The Voice, right, with my kids, or with American Idol. Mm-hmm. And you always think, you always sit there and think, do these guys really think they're good? Like, what? Why would I even
Uh-huh.
try out for this, right? Like, but there is truth to that when everyone around you is telling you, is handling you with kid gloves, right? And telling you, oh no, that's great, that's great, that's great, right? And so I think there is that balance between finding the truth and finding support. And so it's hard, it's rough, and it is the next phase, and it is the part that can hold you back. But you guys have to decide, like, you're that missile, right? And you're gonna get to publishing this book, and so it doesn't matter. Even if it's hard,
Absolutely.
you're gonna go
And
through.
you don't have to take the same route that everybody else takes. Your route may take you at a different angle, and you may go through family for a long time. You may skip family altogether and go to strangers because you don't want your family to see that side of you, whatever it is. But find as long as you're moving forward towards your goal, you're going in the right direction.
Good.
I'm going to see if I have any other big notes here that I wanted to share about editing. Do you guys have any questions before get into them?
I don't have any questions. We had a comment. This came up last week as well. One of our viewers said she found her editor at jury duty. And as I just got summoned again, I wonder what I'll find this time. But you made a comment about that after our recording. You said, I love that I found my editor at jury duty. And that was something that like struck you.
Well, I actually I found a proofer at a soccer game. You know, I go to a lot of soccer games. And she, you know, has a degree in English, and she's a stay-at-home mom. And so I was like, do you want some extra work, right? And so now she's one of my proofers. And
so I've gotten at least 5 people into professional editing over the years. One of them is my daughter, who's a teenager, and she does proofreading for me, and she's done it for some other people.
Emma Kate's amazing, his daughter.
Yeah, actually, it's my other daughter who does the proofing. Emma Kate does formatting and newsletters and stuff like that, and she's great. But my other daughter is more rule oriented and more detail oriented, and so she does the proofing.
I know that.
We have a friend who I've known for about 20 years now, maybe 15 years. And when I was starting a writing group, I asked her, hey, you have book clubs? Are you interested in writing? And she's like, no, but I'd love to come to your writing group and critique. And I'm like, that's like a bonus where you read my stuff and I don't have to spend the time, because it does take time to read other people's. And we had other people in this group, so we would all trade, but she just loved to come and critique. And now she's doing professional editing. And the wife of one of my captains that I've worked with is doing editing. The cousin of my daughter's friend is in college, and she had an interest in it. And so there are people out there.
Sending me, if these people want some extra work, will you send me that, and I'll put it in an email for the people watching?
I will. Okay. Yeah. The other thing, and this is a bit of an aside, but you'll find the people on your journey as you're in the process, as you're pushing forward, as you are doing your steps. I never expected to find the people on my journey that I found where I found them, but I did find them. And the people I found around me have been, I wouldn't be where I was at, where I'm actually thinking of doing this full time, you know, within the next 2 years, if I hadn't found the people on my journey. So if you're doing your job, if you're thinking positive thoughts and keeping everything going that direction, and you're actually writing and moving forward, you'll find the people that will help you on that journey, and you'll help people also. It is a team effort. Taylor and I are super appreciative of each other because we both helped each other so much.
Fun. I love that. That's fun. So I know, is there any other, I was thinking, so yeah, with the proof, okay.
We have a question on the screen. Did we cover this? How many times do I edit the draft on top of the other editors?
Countless.
So you're talking about
earlier on, like you go through as many of your own edits as you can, maybe take it to your writers group, your beta readers, as many rounds as you can before you send it to an editor is what I'm
yeah. And I personally do about between 3 and 5 go-throughs on my first draft. And some of them are just quick, where I'll go through and I'll look at the comments I made to myself and answer those. And then the next time I'll go all the way through to make sure but I'll go through at least 3 times before I send it off, because you want it to be as clean as possible, as I mentioned, but not too clean where when they make major changes, you spend all this time making a beautiful description of this vase, and now the vase isn't in the story anymore. And then when you get it back, you go through it a few more times.
I was gonna say, even after every edit you get back, you're still going through. And I'm even surprised I'll have 4 editors and I'll do another proof before I'm putting it out and I'll still find 2 or 3 mistakes. It's just, you're always editing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've sent things to multiple proofers and then had to publish a story, and then I got an email from a reader, hey, you made this mistake in this book and it's spelled this way, but it should be, oh yeah, you're right. And so when you're an indie author, there are going to be a few mistakes here and there. 99% of the people won't bother them. This was the big hang up for me, is I thought that everything had to be perfect. I was writing these big epic fantasy books, that are 80,000 words or 100,000 words. They span multiple stories. I've got to set up book 7 and book 1. And if I wanted to be a traditional publisher, then that would be the way to go. I would clean up every single line of prose before I send it to an agent. And it would be, with indie publishing, people are more interested in story, and they're more interested with how fast you publish and how quickly you get the story out there than they are with the very details. So you have to write quicker. You have to, I guess, lower your standard is one way to put it, but you have to make it so that the product you're putting out is what the people are looking for out there. Because I was publishing about every year, and I would get a little blip, and then I would fall off the map for 11 months. And then I'd publish again after a year, and this is in fantasy, and I'd get a little blip, and then I fall off the map. And indie publishing, you do have to be quicker than that. And so that means you can't be quite as pretty as you want it.
Well, and Daniel, just take a minute and tell them what you're doing. Like, it's exciting. I'm
Yeah.
excited. And tell them the word length of your books, because we've talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, before I was publishing books that are about 80,000 or 100,000 words, I started with Taylor and Cami, Christine Kersey, writing clean romance, which has been fun. I love writing, and it's been fun writing about firefighters. We've done some Navy SEAL books. I had an urban fantasy book that I wrote about 5 years ago, and I've been sitting on it. I talked to 2 agents, James Dashner's agents and Jennifer Nielsen's agents. So 2 big New York Times bestselling authors, multiple conversations back and forth. They liked it, but it was just not quite right. And so I knew the story had potential, and I didn't want to put it out there the same way I had with my fantasy, where I would just put it out and it would kind of sit there. So I put it in my back pocket. And then this summer I had an idea where that story could be an episode of multiple stories. And so I took this one book, which is a little over 100,000, and I'm chopping it up into multiple books that will each have their own story. And I'm going to rapid release them. So starting in March, I'm going to have a book out every week for about a month. And then I'm going to go every 3 weeks. And so I'm writing right now, I'm in the climax, the final fight scene of book 2 of the second series. So book 7 of the series I'm writing right now, and I haven't published book 1 yet. And so that's my strategy.
Yeah, I was going to say, it is a huge strategy right now in the indie world. Right?
Yep.
Release.
Exactly. And because, once you fall off of Amazon charts, it's hard to get that momentum again. It's hard to, but if you can get up there. And so that's what I'm going to talk to my editor about today. Our conversation is going to be, this is what I'm looking to do. We're going to set up a timeline where I send him the first 5 books, because I need to go back through, now that I'm writing series 2, there's things in series 1 that I want to set up, or I know more about this character, or how he dresses, or what kind of magic he possesses. And so I need to go back and put that in series 1. And so I've kind of been waiting on that. So after I finish book 2 of the second series, I'm going to go back through and work through those. And we'll see what my editor says today, but I'm going to be sending him these starting around the end of the year. So around January 1st, send him and get on a schedule with him. So
I'm so excited for you.
I am too. I love writing. I love making money writing, but I'm super excited getting into a genre that I read a lot. It's been a fun process. Don't be afraid to talk to your editor, whether it's someone you work with, whether it's someone you're looking to work with. Say, hey, I have a bunch of questions. Can I just call you? Or would you prefer email? Interview them, talk back and forth. After you get the edit back, if you have questions about something, write a clarification email, give them a call, say, hey, you didn't like the way this paragraph was, or this chapter. Would you look at this first part of this? Some editors will read a whole second read through as part of the price. Some editors will, but anyone should be willing to at least chat with you and talk about the edit they gave you and clarify anything for you. And if they don't, they'll probably tell you, and they'll say, yeah, that would really require a whole nother edit. And so if that's what you're looking for, then do it. But don't be afraid to hit them up and ask them.
You guys, a lot of times I'll ask Daniel, well, okay, this isn't working. How do I fix it? And he'll know. A lot of times you'll give me 3 or 4 ideas of different ways. And I don't know if that's common, Daniel. I mean,
It's not. I'm glad you bring that up because editors are not supposed to fix stories or even tell you how to fix the story. Technically, they're supposed to, yeah. And that's one thing is I feel like I don't ever tell you how. I mean, maybe once in the
some ideas. You'll just
yeah, but I'll say
this,
mhm.
this.
If their history, if this person was a soldier before, if they worked at a grocery store, then that would tie in with this and you'd have a line here. So I'll throw out a bunch of ideas. I don't think most editors do that or are supposed to do that. I know there are some out there that do it. Some people hate it. Some people do not want you making suggestions or changing the story. So, but if I have a good idea or I think it's a good idea, I'll throw it out there. And if they take it, great. If they don't take it, it's no skin off my back.
And that's probably more a result of the relationship that you've built over time and like your friendship that you guys kind of know each other and you know he knows your writing.
I really value that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and I like that with editors. If they'll tell me your story doesn't work, if it ended like this, then it would work. I like that too. I mean, I'm not guaranteed to use that and I'm not going to pay royalties, anything like that. But if you throw it out there, I may just take it.
So your story actually reminded me of a question that came up for me when we were kind of outlining what do we need to talk about when it comes to editing. And, you know, I've written a book. We haven't explained that to you before, but I wrote a book about 10 years ago that I did nothing with. I sent query letters, nothing happened, and it's just there. And I was under the assumption when I wrote this book, I did have a couple of beta readers, but then I thought, well, my publisher will do the editing for me. Like, my publisher will have an editor. So we talked about this. Do you want to share your thoughts? And then you can share your thoughts about, you know, what does a publisher do? And we already talked last week about the difference between going through a publisher versus indie publishing. So let's just break that down.
I think it depends on what publisher you get and how, you know, if you're a new author, if you're coming on, like at my point, I think they would have different expectations. And so I have had a lot of friends that have been disappointed when they are with a publisher and then they don't get really even a content editor or anything. They just kind of get a proof. That's all they get. So I don't know about you, Daniel.
I agree. And unless you're an established author with that editor, you have to have it developed and content clear before they'll even accept it. So to get a publisher, you've got to have the story edited and you've got to have it pretty sharp. They'll do the copy editing and proofreading, how much you want to pay for that before you send it in, because they're not going to be too big on that as long as you have a basic grasp on the English language. But you're going to want to have it as clean as possible to get that publisher, because you're not going to get one. And even once you get them, then you'll know what they expect, but you're not going to be able to get a publisher for that book unless it's been content edited, because they won't want it. Like Taylor said, they may do their own content edit. They may be happy with what you got and they may just do a proofread.
Okay. I'm going to encourage our viewers at this point, if you have any other questions while we're wrapping up, please drop them into the Q&A window. If you just click Q&A and add them into the Q&A window, we'll make sure that we address any questions that you've had come up for you throughout this process.
Did we want to?
Yeah, we can take this first one now. So we have a viewer that says, I have found editing issues in books I've read and told the author. I doubt my ability to do this for myself. How do you get past this? So I can see where she's coming from. Like, yeah, I can totally edit somebody else's work, but I can't do it to myself.
You hire it out.
You hire it out. I'm the same way, Anna, because I can fix other people's books. I cannot fix my own book. I can't do content editing on my own books. I can't do proofreading on my own books. Yeah. So find someone out. And you know what? If you're just getting started out and you don't have the money for it, find beta. There are really good beta readers out there. There are friends and family that love you and will support you and will give you really good advice. There are people who check with people who you know who are in book clubs. That's a good place to start. You know, hey, I know you've done a book club for 5 years. You love reading. And people are so excited to be involved, to meet a real author, someone who's finished a book, and to be a part of that process.
Yeah, my friends were that way when I had them be my beta readers for my first book. I had one friend that was an English major, and I was like, great, you'd be my perfect editor. And she was my best friend in college. And so it was just a really perfect fit. And she was great. And my other friend was one that I grew up with, and she loves to read. She's a voracious reader. She's in book clubs. And so she was another like ideal fit. And it was fun to have them read my book and give me some feedback, but they didn't understand some of the things that I think we've talked about now in terms
structure.
Of, yeah, the playbook, having the story arc, the structure. And so now in the future, if I took it to a beta reader, I think I might help them understand, here's kind of what the frame of the story is supposed to look like. is this working for you? Does this give you the satisfaction that you want? And then I'm going to ask them specifically, what are the scenes that you want me to zoom in on? Like you said, like where I need to beef it up a little bit. What are the scenes that are you're like, this sucks, cut it. And I'm going to ask them for more specific feedback now that I know what I need as a writer, because I think that they were just reading it like, oh, that was fun. And just, they read it and just, you know, now I'm going to be like, okay, let's drill down into this is the type of feedback I really do want from you. So don't be afraid to be honest with me.
Yeah.
And
that's a really good point. I think beta readers need, I get questions from my authors most of the time, pay attention to this. And I'm not sure if his character arc is steep enough. But beta readers need more guidance than that. They need more questions like you said, is this part of the story working, or I wanted to have this type of a feel. So yeah, don't be afraid to give your beta reader some guidance of what you're looking for.
Sounds like that might be another resource we ought to create for this program. Here's your beta reader guideline sheet. When you send your work, here's what you need to ask your beta readers.
Great idea.
It can just, you could each personalize that for what you're ready for.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, it'd have to be a personalized thing.
Nothing more, nothing less.
Tell me good stuff.
Okay, another question. Resources you might suggest as well.
What kind of resources? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I know, because we already mentioned
how to find editors.
20 books to 50K on Facebook is a great resource. They actually do it nonprofit, you guys, for writers. And so there's just so many, like I couldn't put together a better list than what they have. They have so many great things.
Yeah.
If you're on Facebook, there are some really good writing groups there, and you'll feel some that are toxic and negative, and you can get out of those and you can join other ones, and there's new ones popping up all the time. But Facebook is a good resource for a lot of different things as a writer. I'm trying to think of what other resources you could use. Read books on.
Yeah, we talked about conferences and workshops.
Yeah. Okay. I was just going to say, read books. Read books on characterization. I have a book by Orson Scott Card. This is one of my favorites. I'm going to pull it real quick. I'm a viewpoint Nazi. That if someone goes out of their head and into someone else's head, or there's something, I go crazy. I go off the wall. And I learned a lot of it from Orson Scott Card's character in Viewpoint. It was something that I was interested in Viewpoint because I think you really get deep penetration into someone's head, a character's head. You can really make the reader feel a lot more emotion. So Viewpoint was important to me. So I went out and I found a book on exactly what I wanted to learn about. So if there's something that interests you, whether it's settings, whether it's prose, whether it's characters, there are writing books out there by legitimate sources. And you can go on Amazon, see what kind of reviews they have, and figure out that particular piece of your writing.
So maybe that's a question. Could you throw that out in the Facebook group that you mentioned, where you would say, what books do people recommend on this
Definitely. Definitely. Great idea. Yeah. Great idea.
All right.
We've had a lot of comments that, you guys have had your questions answered today. So I hope so. And I can send you a list of books I've read. I have a huge bookshelf on writing. I think you have to keep growing. I want to keep growing.
Yeah.
As a writer.
Look for what books have good reviews. I mean, that's a way that I always gauge, is this book going to be helpful to me or not, is whether or not it has good reviews, a high rating, and people saying, wow, this really helped me so much. So if you're doing a search on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever that might be on writing, check out the reviews.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Daniel, so much for taking your time today and showing up to help me and to help our audience. And thanks always to Taylor and being this radiant leader that she is.
Well, this is fun. You guys, I love it. And I'm so glad, Daniel, thanks for coming today, because when I was really like, okay, I have to teach on editing. Oh, I got to call DC. Daniel.
I appreciate it.
His books in March. You're going to release in March?
March 19th is my target date for the first book, and they may come up or back a little bit, but yeah, so I'm not releasing anything until then, which is nervous. I had a collection to come out today of my firefighter books, but from now until March 19th, I've got nothing coming out, which makes me nervous. And that's great that 3 months without releasing anything is making me nervous. It shows that I've really grown. I've really gotten with how the market is. So thanks for having me on. It was tons of fun talking with you
He's
about it.
under Daniel Banner for his Clean Romance.
So those are the firefighter books. I was going to say, if our friends want to read some firefighter romance over the winter break.
They're good.
Yep, Daniel Banner. You can find me on Amazon. It's all, and like I said, the romance collection came out today, so you can get $5 books, and it's under $5 this week. It's on sale, and it's in KU and all that.
So. I'm gonna go get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It was fun. I love talking about writing, and I love talking about editing. And good luck to everyone in the course. I'm glad that you guys are here. It's exciting that you're here sharpening your saw and becoming better writers. And good luck with everything. It's such a fulfilling venture for me, and I just can't get enough of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Okay.
And thanks to everyone for being here. We'll see you again, same time, same place next week.